I'm really excited to bring you today's podcast. We're going to be talking about a subject that I think is very near and dear to many of you, and it's women in their 30s and 40s and what they should do as far as diet, supplements, and exercise. You can't necessarily expect that you do the same thing when you're in your 20s as you can do in your 30s and 40s and expect the same results. And this is something that I hear from my patients all the time. They tell me, Dr. Youn, I'm working out, I'm eating the same as I did when I was in my 20s, but why is it that my body's not doing the same thing as it used to? And so today I'm going to be joined by a good friend of mine who has all the answers to this of what to eat, the supplements to take, and how to exercise when you're in your 30s and 40s, these types of things when you're in your 30s and 40s and you're a woman. I'm going to be joined by a good friend of mine. Her name is Dr. Stephanie Estima. And let me introduce her here. She is a world-renowned women's health expert on improving health span, lifespan, and optimal performance. Through a deep understanding of neuroscience, metabolism, nutrition, and exercise physiology, she helps women make informed choices on evidence-based health strategies and tools. Dr. Stephanie is the host of Better with Dr. Stephanie, a top-rated podcast with over 7 million downloads. She's been featured in Women's Health Magazine, Strong Fitness, Huffington Post, Oxford University, and many of the most prestigious stages in health. Well, Dr. Stephanie lives in Toronto, Canada, with her husband and her sons. She is an avid weightlifter, a former bikini competitor, and a lover of languages. And she is really a fountain of information for women who are in their 30s and 40s and how they can optimize what they eat, the supplements they may take, and the exercise that they're doing so that they can get the most benefit out of it. This interview has a lot of actionable information. I think you're going to find it fascinating as I did, and I think you're going to hopefully learn a ton. So let's get started with my interview with my good friend, Dr. Stephanie Estima. Thank you so much for joining me today, Stephanie.
I am just delighted to be here with you again. Thank you for having me.
So we're going to talk all about women in their 30s and 40s and what they should consider eating. We're going to talk about supplements. We're going to talk about exercise. But before we do that, can you give me just a quick once-over of your career and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah. So, doctor of chiropractic by training, spent 19 years in private practice, treating lots of necks and backs. And one of the primary philosophical premises that I've always had is that we don't just, in my clinic, we don't just crack things. We're not just rehab. We are really looking at the whole person, and very similar in the way that you do. A holistic plastic surgeon. I was very much a holistic doctor, so I wanted to make sure that we were looking at rehab, but also looking at nutrition, looking at fitness, looking at stress management, sleep, all the things. Sorry. I was just going to say, in practice, started to notice we would run nutrition programs, fitness programs, and there was a really big difference between the outcomes that my male patients were having versus my female. And then just over time, that really there was a huge difference in trajectory. So started playing around with nutrition protocols, fitness protocols, sleep, diving into the science. And that was the topic of my first book. It's called The Betty Body. And that's all just about menstrual cycle literacy, how women and men are very different, how women can change their nutrition and their fitness to align with their menstrual cycle. Now I am in perimenopause. My audience has sort of grown up with me, and I am writing now my next book on perimenopausal strategies and how to live a great life in this transition. So that's sort of the back of the envelope, really quick story on me.
In your research, have you found that women who are in perimenopause have been, I guess, I wouldn't say ignored, but kind of all the changes that happen in perimenopause? Has there been a paucity of information and help for them to go through this phase?
Not really, which is why I think I need to write a book. I think it's starting to get more and more attention now. Thankfully, we have a lot of people in the online space and otherwise talking about menopause. You have like the menopause, right? So you have like all the women who are in menopause that are like, we need HRT, right? So you sort of have that group of women, which is wonderful. And many of them are colleagues and friends of mine. And I do think that perimenopause is still this sort of like, well, we don't really know what to do. So you're not quite ready for HRT yet. Estrogen, maybe it's a little too early for estrogen, maybe some progesterone. But women are often left being either dismissed by their physicians because the physician doesn't know what to do, online information. People go to Instagram and YouTube and all the places, and there's lots of conflicting information. Some of it's based in science, some of it's not. So I think a lot of perimenopausal women are like, okay, I get it. Menopause, I understand menopause, but I'm in perimenopause. What do I do right now? So I don't think that there's enough good quality information as of this recording on what to do if you're in perimenopause.
So, just to start out with, how would you then describe somebody who's in perimenopause? So, how is somebody who's listening today to say, well, geez, my doctor never said anything about perimenopause. I understand what menopause is, but what exactly then is perimenopause?
Yeah, so the definite, like the textbook definition is peri meaning around, and then menopause is, the cessation of your menstrual cycle. So around the time of your menstrual cycle cessation. But for most women, we're going to see symptoms ranging anywhere between 5 and 15 years before then. So this is a huge, I mean, just think like think about 5 to 15 years ago, like what were you doing? You were it's such a huge part of your life, right? So 5 to 15 years before you go into menopause, most women will start to see a steady decline. If you're looking at labs, they'll start to see declines in progesterone first, and then through their mid to late 40s, we start to see wilder vacillations in estrogen. We start to see sort of a stepwise decline in testosterone. These are the sex hormones that govern our reproductive cycle as we reach sort of ovarian maturity or ovarian failure. And then there's a whole host of other things that women can deal with. We often think of like, oh, menopause, hot flashes, but this is actually usually quite a late sign, and not all women experience, based on your genetics and your ethnicity, you may not even experience hot flashes. So, for example, a lot of women of Asian descent don't actually experience a lot of hot flashes. They experience more muscle and bone loss, so they become more frail, versus someone who is of Latin descent or even African American descent. They tend to have more vasomotor issues. So, oh gosh, I could go on so many tangents now, but I'll just say that hot flashes are kind of the popular symptom that everybody thinks about, but it can be more subtle. Things like your skin feeling like really itchy. A lot of women will say like my ears are burning, or they're really itchy, or not sleeping at night, mood and affect changes, body composition changes. That's a really big one for my community. They'll say, I'm doing literally the same thing that I was doing when I was 35 or 25, but all of a sudden my waist is disappearing, right? I'm like that thickening through the midsection. I can't seem to do anything about it. So these are more common things that women will experience, and it may or may not include hot flashes. But I think that waiting until we see hot flashes is probably too late.
So you're talking in general, with perimenopause women who are, would you say like mid 30s to 40s, or are there a lot of women that even go into perimenopause and when they're in their early 30s?
Well, it's really interesting. We actually are starting to see, now that we're expanding what our definition of symptoms and the cluster of symptoms around perimenopause is, we're actually starting to see some women in their, early to mid 30s starting to say, actually, I think that these might be perimenopausal. So, yes, I would say as a general rule, around your mid 30s is where, and I have an arbitrary cutoff of about 35. Most women around 35 are going to start to see some changes in their progesterone levels. And then as you sort of progress 30, late 30s, early 40s, you might start seeing some of the sleep disturbances, mood and affect, anxiety, the stress and the demands of your life that you used to be able to handle. We can argue maybe it was already too much, but you just had more capacity when you were 25. Now, when you're 35 or 45, just seems really overwhelming for you. Yeah.
And one of the things that we're figuring out now is that as women go into perimenopause, I hear this from my patients all the time. And you mentioned just a minute ago is people say, look, I'm kind of living the same way as I used to, yet my body is changing. Things don't seem to work like they used to. If I gain a few pounds, I used to, eat salads for a week and work out harder and that weight would go off. Now people are finding that, geez, I get to that level and I do the things I used to and it doesn't seem to work anymore. And so that's what we're going to focus on today, and why I'm so excited to have you with me, because I know this is something that you personally have gone through, of making changes in how you live, how you eat, and how you work out. And I think it's important for people to realize that you can't necessarily, or you shouldn't necessarily do and eat the same thing all your life. that things should change based off the place you are in life in order to optimize, I guess, what you're eating, the exercise that you're doing, so that you can benefit the most from it. Um, is this something that, is this something that, you have read about, that you've yourself discovered? Is this something that you were taught in some of your training? How did this all come around? Because I know it's something that you've been very vocal about on your social media and on your podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I would say that and this is, I feel so blessed to be trained as a chiropractor, because chiropractors actually do get quite a bit of nutrition training. We get quite a lot of anatomy, quite a lot of physical, obviously a lot of physical rehab. So I did have quite a bit of nutrition training. However, I will say that the distinct, when I'm a, like, proud grad of, 2003, class of 2003, we didn't really get a lot of like, well, men are like this and women are like this. Like, we had, here's the menstrual
Well,
cycle.
women
This
are
is what
just
men.
smaller men,
Right,
right?
exactly. It's like, well, whatever, and that's, at the time when I was a student, like, there was really no precedent for looking at women and men differently. It's just like you're saying, it's like we're just these smaller archetypes of men with these pesky hormones, right? So yeah, I do think that we need to change. I think we need to, as women, really understand your menstrual cycle. If you're someone still in her reproductive years, you should be tracking it. Um, I struggled. This was the subject of my first book. I struggled immensely with my menstrual cycle. It was just, I felt like I was being punished for being a woman, like, every single month. It was very, very, very painful. Lots of cramp. It would really affect my ability to just participate in my life. And I and I'm happy to talk about it now, but I instituted sort of I pulled back on the carbohydrates that I was consuming, really went into more of a ketogenic style um, protocol for a couple of years, actually, and then started cycling in and out of keto. I'm no longer there, and I can talk a little bit about why that is. But I do think that if you are someone who is in her 40s and you're noticing, just to your point, that the things that you used to do when you were 25 or 35 are no longer working for you, well, one, you're right, because you are an older, maybe more lived woman now. Hopefully you've had more experience under your belt. And just from a like, looking at it from a physiological lens, you're likely more insulin resistant. That's something that just happens naturally as we age. We become more insulin resistant. If you're a 45-year-old or 55-year-old woman, maybe your estrogen levels are much lower than they were when you were 25. And that's also going to dictate our estrogen. Almost dictates how our fat is deposited on the body. So when we are under the influence, there's different estrogen types. There's three main types. Estradiol, which is E2, we often that is the dominant estrogen in our reproductive years. As that begins to wane in perimenopause, we actually become more estrone dominant, or E1. And so as we are losing that estradiol, E2, we actually move from depositing fat, let's say, in the lower half of our body, so our thighs, our bum, kind of lower tummy, to really that central deposition. So we start to actually, this is where a lot of women are like, my waist is disappearing, because you're starting to pack on more visceral fat as you lose estradiol. So it's not just in your head. There is literally the phenotype of fat is changing. It's moving from being more subcutaneous, which is just living under the skin, to more of a visceral type of fat, which is like basically packing in and around organs.
Mm-hmm. So, what are some of the changes that women should consider making as they're entering this perimenopause and they're noticing these changes?
The first thing, if you're not already lifting weights, like, that is first and
Well,
foremost.
let's get to the
Yeah.
weights in a little bit, but diet
Yeah.
wise, I guess,
Oh,
is what
diet
are some
wise.
of the
Yeah,
things? Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Let's stay on diet, and then we'll definitely
Let's stay
want to
on
get to
diet.
the exercise. Yeah.
Okay. So I would say, so here's how my opinion has changed. So I think I still am a big advocate for the ketogenic diet. I think that it provides a lot of, when you really pull back on carbohydrates, there's a lot of benefits that can happen. First, you're going to drop a lot of water weight, which a lot of women just feel like relief from, right? And it also gives you that sort of dopamine, like, it gives you that little hit of dopamine. You're like, okay, this is working. I can continue going on it. I think that it can also help reverse some of the insulin insensitivity that can sort of creep in as we age. What I want to put a caveat on, and this is something that I didn't quite see at the time of writing the book, is that so many women became dreadfully afraid of carbohydrates. They're like, oh, okay, I've lost all this weight. I feel good. My insulin level is improving. It's not so high anymore. My fasting blood, all of these markers are improving. It's because carbs are bad and I should never have carbs. And so what I noticed was that trying to get people out of keto, like saying, okay, the diet has run its course. We don't want to stay in low carb land forever. There was so much resistance that I had from women, and I was like, "What is going?" And then I sort of realized that these women were petrified of having carbohydrates, and this is actually something that I have a conversation with online. If you've ever seen me, I put like little surveys and stuff in our stories, and women are petrified of bread. They're petrified. It's like, guys, I just want to also mention vegetables are carbohydrates, like fruits are carbohydrates. So yeah, there's a little bit of undoing, a little bit of unlearning, I think that needs to happen with respect to carbohydrates. I think when we're thinking about overall nutrition, for a woman in perimenopause, we want to be prioritizing protein. We know, everybody and their mother knows that we need to be having protein now. So something like 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is a really great target to start off with. The average American, I think, consumes something like 40 to 60 grams of protein a day. So she's already under consuming protein unless you weigh 60 pounds, which is impossible if you're alive. So we really want to at least double that. So somewhere between 80 to 120 grams minimum. But myself, I also consume higher levels than my body weight. So I'm regularly consuming like 160 to 175, sometimes 80 grams of protein a day. I'm also active, very active. So I'm training 4 or 5 times a week. I'm playing tennis several times a week, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I think it can go up depending on your physical needs as well. So protein is the first thing. You need to prioritize protein in midlife. The carbohydrate story I was kind of touching on. I think once you have gone through a therapeutic intervention like a ketogenic diet, you can start moving your carbohydrates, integrating fruits and vegetables primarily. And then, of course, sourdough breads and the pastas and the things that, delight you or that are culturally relevant to you. You can begin to integrate carbohydrates into your diet as well. My recommendation there is the same as it is for protein. It's like 1 gram per pound. So if you're like a buck 30, a buck 40, buck 50, whatever it is, like you're having the equivalent in carbohydrates daily. And if I can, I'd just like to explain why, because I think people hear that and they're like, okay, fine, but why is this important? Carbohydrates, we've heard the protein story with muscle protein synthesis. Like when we have protein, we are driving this process called muscle protein synthesis, which is just like what it sounds like. We are creating new muscle proteins, but carbohydrates are also the other part of that equation. So in order to grow muscle, which should be, and we'll get to this when we talk about exercise, it should be a primary goal for women in midlife. When we think about how much muscle you can grow, it's a very simple equation. It's like muscle protein synthesis, so like protein, minus muscle protein breakdown is going to give you how much net muscle growth you have. So we know that the MPS, or the muscle protein synthesis, is driven by protein consumption. The net muscle protein breakdown, we protect our body, we spare our muscles from being broken down when we have carbohydrates in the diet. So this is why the protein and the carb combination is very important. Not to mention performance in the gym or in tennis or whatever cardiovascular activity. Like when you have some fuel in the tank, particularly carbohydrates, because they're easy to break down, those are usually gonna go right to the muscle to use for fuel. Mood and affect. A lot of women who I've counseled over many years who've been on a ketogenic style diet for too long, we actually start to see their thyroid starting to decrease in function after a while. Like the thyroid also needs insulin to convert the inactive T4, which is an inactive thyroid hormone, to the active form, which is T3. And your thyroid is like the main metabolic endocrine organ. It's like the master organ for your metabolism in the body. So if you don't have enough insulin, you're not going to be converting enough of this inactive hormone, which doesn't do anything, to the active hormone, which is actually keeping your weight and your body composition the way that you want it to.
So, you did a lot of keto when you were younger. Do you still feel that long-term keto in people then who are, let's say, in their 20s or early 30s is okay, and it's just going into perimenopause that it becomes untenable? Or do you feel that really keto for everybody should be considered more of a temporary place to be, a way to kind of clean up your system and to feel better and all of that, but nobody should do keto long term?
Yeah, I mean, certainly depends on on the individual, so I can never say like for sure, but my general feeling is that the ketogenic diet is a wonderful therapeutic intervention. So we go there temporarily, just like if you were to have if you had an infection, you would temporarily go on the antibiotics. You would not be on there permanently forever because once the infection has run its course, the antibiotics have done their thing, you can kind of get back to regular thing and a regular life. And I think that the same is true for your diet. You can pull different levers depending on the problem that you're having. For most women, we are going to run into muscle loss, which contributes to insulin resistance. We're going to, we'll talk about fitness. I don't want to get into sedentary, like I'm sort of dancing around it a little bit, but we want to make sure that we could pull levers from a nutrition perspective that are going to give us the greatest leverage in terms of metabolic flexibility. And we don't want to, I always think of like, running, like if you think of a chart, you have like a bell curve, right? So there's, when we think about if you ever went to university, and they would always bell curve the marks to sort of like, average everything out. On the area under the apex of the curve is sort of the maximum benefit that you're kind of going to get from a diet. So, but if you keep going there, for this is what I saw with so many women, they're like, oh my God, keto saved me. So once the diet stopped working for them, most women, instead of deducing, hey, maybe I've run it, maybe this diet has run its course, they're like, no, I just gotta do it harder. I just gotta do keto more. I gotta restrict more. And I think that this is maybe I don't know if you find this, but I find that women tend to blame themselves rather than, like, they tend to internalize the problem rather than saying, maybe the thing that I'm doing on the outside isn't working for me
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
That's
Well,
sort
I
of been
mean,
my observation with
society has
women.
always been like that, though. They have,
Yeah.
it always pins a blame on the women for all of that. If women's got a health problem, well, it's because they're hysterical. It's like that term
Right.
hysteria and
Right.
all.
It's
It's
their
just kind of.
uterus. Yeah. It's their
Do you
wandering
think that?
uterus.
Do you think that's similar with like a vegan diet too? I mean, how many people do we know and who have gone, plant based and they feel great, they lose weight, they've got a ton of energy, and then 6 months, 9 months, a year later, they're dragging, they've gained a bunch of that weight back, the skin doesn't look the same, and they find that, geez, I think I need some. I mean, I feel like some of it is just, it's like cleaning out your system. You kind of get excited because you are in some ways cleaning up your system, but then your body necessarily, I think with some rare exceptions, isn't really made to stay in that type of a diet for long term.
Totally. Yeah, it's the exact same thing. I can't tell you how many vegans, when you try, like, anything other than the standard American diet is an improvement, right? So you go to veganism and you feel great because you're eating more plants, you're getting more fiber, you're getting some of the phytonutrients that are in those plants. And then you run into B vitamin deficiencies and your hair falls out and you can't sleep at night and all the things. So yeah, I would say the same is true for any intervention that's extreme. I've had some good success with the carnivore diet for women with Hashimoto's, like with thyroid dysfunction. But again, short term, like we don't stay there long because the thyroid, and like I was explaining before, needs some base level of carbohydrates to do its job well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think with the carnivore diet too, part of it is I feel like your body is in a constant anabolic state where it's always grow, 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 grow. And I don't know that that's necessarily, I mean, there's a such thing with autophagy and letting your body rest and kind of clean out itself and all of that. I think that plays into it. When we first met many years ago, you were doing a lot of fasting. And some of the fasting that you were doing, I was amazed with because there's no way I could do it. Um, Tell me about how your beliefs in intermittent fasting and just general fasting has changed, and how women who are in their 30s and 40s and even 50s should think about fasting as a way to optimize their health. Because I think a lot of that has changed. When we first started talking, I mean, you were telling me about some of the fasts you're doing. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I'm so happy we're talking about this because I think that this brings a lot of nuance to the conversation, which I think is really important for nutrition. I think sometimes it can be very like black and white. And of course, with anything, there's lots of shades of gray. So, yeah, when fasting is like the premier, the premier topic for so many years. And I think that it does, I think fasting still is a wonderful tool for caloric restriction. If someone has a hard time with managing their calories through the day. I think that it absolutely can be regenerative in the way that you described with this process called autophagy, which is just like Pac-Man's going around and cleaning up all the debris in the body. Again, I have softened on fasting. So, you were saying you were doing some crazy fasting. Like, yeah, I was doing like 72-hour and 96-hour fasts. Like I was not eating for like 3 or 5 days. Like it was nuts. And so I remember, and I'm friends with him now, so I can sort of share the story. But I remember before I knew him, I was listening. It was like 2017, and I was listening to Dominic D'Agostino. He was on the Tim Ferriss show, and he was talking about the ketogenic diet. He was talking about fasting, and he was like, "Yeah, I just finished a fast. It was 5 days, and then I went and I deadlifted. I can't remember. It was like some insane amount. Like he's a beast. It was something like 500 pounds or something. I was like, okay, well, if Dominic can do it." It's like, again, forgetting that I'm a woman with a menstrual cycle. I'm like, I'm going to do the same thing. So I would do these really long fasts. And then I ended up really like initially seeing a really nice benefit to my symptoms with my menstrual cycle. But the more I did it, right, the more I tried to white knuckle my way through these extreme fasts, I started messing around with my menstrual cycle where I would miss or I'd have anovulatory cycle, all these different things would happen. So all that to say, yeah, I've really softened my view on fasting. I think that if you love to fast, have at it. You can totally still fast. I would counsel you, or I would maybe invite you to consider, instead of the fasting of yesteryear, where it was like only eat, try to push your eating window until 12 o'clock and open the eating window at 11 or 12 o'clock and then eat for 8 hours. I would maybe counsel you to think a little bit more, to eat aligned with more of your circadian biology. So eating when you wake up, or shortly after waking, and then stopping your eating several hours before you go to bed, because that's going to really help with your sleep. For most people, that's very well documented. Sachin Panda has done a lot of research here. So if you still want to fast, that's great. And then again, if you're a woman and you're still cycling, you're still menstruating, you're probably going to find that there's some times of the cycle that you just can't do that. Like the second half of your cycle, after like the 12 to 16 days before you bleed, you're going to find that or after you ovulate, you're going to find that it's very, very difficult for you to do really long fasts because your metabolic output is much higher, because you're creating an endometrial lining. Whether or not you want to get pregnant, that's what your biology is doing. So, for me now, what I don't really fast. Like I fast overnight, obviously, like I'm not eating overnight. I wake up, I typically, if it's during the week, I'm usually at the gym, like usually first thing, like I'll have some coffee with like I have a cappuccino, so the milk has some protein in it. And then I'll eat when I come home from the gym. So I'll have like a big, egg omelet, avocados and all the things. So I'm usually eating in the morning, somewhere around 7:30 or 8 is when I'm eating. And then I'll eat until probably, I don't know, 7-ish at night. So what is that? 11 hours? No. Yeah, 12 hours. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
How much of the fast, I think the issue with fasting for some people and having such a short eating window is if you're eating, you're going to probably eat less, and there are some people who believe that the main benefits of fasting is reducing your caloric intake because you're just eating less because you're awake or you're eating in a smaller window. Um, but how much of that do you think too is the issue of if you have less meals, maybe you're eating less protein and it's hard to get the protein that you want to get in such a small eating window?
Yeah, I think it's both of those things. I think fasting is a good tool for caloric restriction. It is very hard to get in all of your calories in a condensed feeding time. But the issue, as you've pointed out so well, is that you really have to be cognizant that you may not be meeting your protein requirements, because protein is heavy. Like it's hard. I are even at a 12-hour eating window, many women are like, I just can't get in that much protein. Like it's very, very filling. And people, and we can kind of get into the nuances around appetite with women, because I think that years and years of caloric restriction does actually mess up with your appetite. Like your cues are a little bit off. So a lot of women do have to eat past their perceived satiety level because they've had this metabolic adaptation of this prolonged caloric restriction, so that feeling of fullness comes a little bit sooner for those women. But yeah, I think that you have to really be cognizant that you may not be consuming enough protein. And from a nutrition perspective, women in midlife, especially in perimenopause, this is the time to get your ducks in order, right? Because this is the time where you have the potential to feel the worst after menopause. The years leading up to menopause for most women are the times where they feel the most tumultuous. We see the most change in mood and affect. We see the big changes in body composition. Dr. Lisa Mosconi's work in the brain, we see that the brain is pruning and changing. After menopause, you're a little bit more like the storm has passed, like you're sort of more even keel, like you feel the same. And there's other requirements for that cohort. You need hormone replacement therapy, you still need to be having the protein and all of that. But in perimenopause is where all the change is happening. So you do have to be cognizant of getting in enough protein and enough calories, because and we'll talk about fitness, but if you want to grow muscle, you need to give your muscles building blocks, like the building blocks from your diet, in order to assemble new proteins.
So, when you're looking at supplements for women who are in their 30s and 40s or in perimenopause, what are some of the supplements that you recommend? We've talked a bit about food, and I think, prioritizing protein. We've talked about how sticking with extreme type diets may not be in your best interests, although, once again, using it as a therapeutic regimen may make sense. How about supplements, and what do you recommend for your followers?
Um, my recommendations on supplements hasn't changed much. I think that you need to make magnesium part of your personality. Like I think you need to be having
Even if you're sleeping
magnesium.
fine.
Yes, exactly. Even if you're sleeping fine, magnesium is involved in, I don't know, it's like, last time it was like 603 or something enzymatic reactions in the body. It's like a crazy amount. So even if you sleep well, if you're someone who is under a lot of demand or a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, which is every woman in midlife, you're gobbling through that magnesium faster. So I love magnesium for women. An omega
Real
3,
quick,
I think
before
oh,
you go into
yes,
omega 3,
sorry.
what version of
Mhm.
magnesium do you have a preference? So like,
I think for most, glycinate is fine. It's highly bioavailable. Like there's citrate, there's orotate, there's L-theanine, like there's lots of them. I think I really just will recommend glycinate for most people, because like it's just going to do the job. But if you want to have some of the benefits of if sleep is an issue for you, the L-threonate, taking that in the evening, because that type of magnesium uh, can cross the blood-brain barrier, and it can have some relaxations effect in the brain, as well as the systemically in the body too. Yeah. So, and I would say as a minimum, like 400 mgs, like 400 milligrams for most women is going to do you just fine. If you're someone who's magnesium deficient, you may consider going up, but I would work with your practitioner on that. You'll know when you've overdone it on magnesium, because you will start to see some GI distress from it. So you'll start to see it's usually not constipation. You usually actually see loose stools, maybe some diarrhea. So you'll kind of know when you've reached that upper limit for you. But I would always recommend working with a practitioner to sort of figure that out in terms of what you need.
okay. And then you mentioned you're starting on omega 3s.
Yeah, love omega 3s. I think one of the things that we have to do in midlife is really combat, inflammaging. It's like this. I've heard Mark Hyman say this word. I love it. So it's sort of a portmanteau of like inflammation and aging, inflammaging together. We just become more inflamed as we age for lots of reasons, lots of different reasons. The sun can do it. It's like excess blue light, stress at home, all the things. So omega 3s, 2 to 3 grams daily. I think every woman would really benefit from that. It has cardioprotective, benefits. Can help with joint pain, general systemic inflammation. It's fantastic. So every woman in midlife, an omega 3 for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Any other supplements that you recommend?
Yeah. I would say as a baseline, we got magnesium, omega 3. I'd say vitamin D. is super important. Even if you live in sunny Florida, you're probably spending most of your time indoors because it's too hot. So I would say, and I've actually run labs. I've had patients in Florida with vitamin D levels of like 30. It's ridiculous. So, vitamin D, I think everyone should be on vitamin D. And interestingly, I haven't read the paper yet, but there was a paper that just came out. This is just me nerding out with you for a moment. Your vitamin D status can actually determine whether you are going to store fuel in the muscle or store fuel in the fat. So I thought that this was really interesting. I haven't read the whole paper yet, but it's on my little thing to read on the weekend. So vitamin D, creatine, not just for orange gym bros. I think I think we're seeing a lot of benefits, not only muscle performance in the gym, but also brain benefits. I had Dr. Darren Kando on my podcast, and if you haven't had him, I want to make an introduction to you. He's like the premier creatine researcher in the world. 5 grams of creatine monohydrate daily has been shown to improve muscle performance, and if you want it to have some of the brain benefits, about 10 grams daily. So that's what I do. I take 10 grams of creatine daily. And then the last one, I'll say every woman, like I said, is stressed out. So some type of adaptogen. So I think ashwagandha is really well researched. Shishandra is also really interesting. Those would be sort of my base foundational supplements for a woman in perimenopause. I don't. And I'll tell you why. I think I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with probiotics because I feel like you look in the label and it's like lactobacillus, there's like 3 billion CFUs or whatever, and it has to be refrigerated so that they're, you get it you go to Whole Foods or wherever it is and it's in the refrigerator. It's like, well, your body temperature is 98.6. So if you have to refrigerate this thing, what's going to happen when it reaches the acid in your stomach and the core body temperature? Like, it's going to denature, like, if it's not already dead in the fridge at Whole Foods, what makes you think it's going to survive the stomach? So I don't like probiotic. I think if you are going to do a probiotic, I would say spore-based probiotic. But like the lactobacilli, I'm not a fan. I'm
How
probably going
about
to ruffle some feathers. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess if you stay with that line of thinking, then you would think that probiotic rich foods would also
Right.
not help, but it seems like they do. But we could
I
talk to
mean,
Summer Bach about that maybe.
yeah, I would love to hear what she has to say. I mean, I have fermented foods. I have sauerkraut daily. I actually, like, I don't know if this is TMI, but I drink the juice from the sauerkraut bottle. Like, when it's done, I love to just take a little bit of that. But it's the same thing, right? I'm sure some of it is getting through, like the same with I'm sure that some of the probiotic is getting through. But I just don't know if it's enough. I just don't know if it's enough to be clinically useful. Yeah.
How about collagen?
Oh, yes, I love collagen. Yes,
Okay.
love
I was gonna say,
collagen.
because
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a huge
Yeah, yeah.
collagen guy. So
I love collagen. And then also, skin, hair, and nails, but also for the joints, right? There's some really interesting studies that look at collagen supplementation and the joint's ability to selectively take up the collagen for for reparation, like to heal, degradation in the joint in whatever capacity. So yeah, huge fan of collagen as well.
all right, so we've been dancing around this, and I know it's a huge thing for you is exercise. You're very open on social media, showing the different workouts that you're doing, ones that are helpful, ones that may not be as helpful. So let's talk about how, as women get in their mid 30s and their 40s, how they should consider maybe changing their exercise routine. When you and I grow up, and I'm probably about 10 years older than you, I think, we're used to basically it's like intense cardio workouts for an hour. I remember my wife many, many years ago got the DVDs for, it's called Insanity.
Oh
And it
my
was just,
gosh, I had them too.
oh, it's insane because of the amount of just like constant
Yeah.
like exercise, all aerobic workouts. It was just, you can't, it's not doable. And, how many patients now that I'm seeing where they say, look, I'm going in, I've gone through perimenopause, I'm in that area. I am eating the same food I used to. I'm exercising more. I'm doing, I'm running, doing cardio for an hour every other day, sometimes every day, and I'm still gaining weight. let's talk about this because I think this is something that a lot of people, even today, especially today, don't really know about. So, how should women change how they exercise when they start hitting in their mid 30s to 40s?
Well, I'm so excited. I already sort of said it on the show. I think that we should all be resistance training. And I just want to say that I totally get the mind shift because I had the Sean, like shout out to Sean, is Sean T, I think was his name from Insanity. Like I had that. I was doing, and it was like that program, if you remember it, it was like 5 to 6 days a week of doing this
Yeah,
crazy
it's
high
like crazy.
intensity stuff.
Yeah.
Nuts. So I grew up with that. I was actually also a fitness instructor. It's like one of my first loves. I still love the step. I just love, like, I taught step, I did high low, I did all that stuff. So I grew up in the cardio section of the gym and in group exercise. So I totally get this mindset. And I'll say that you can still keep, like, if you love step or you love some type of like combat class or something, like some group exercise fitness, and this is like your soul food, right? Like you have community there, you meet the same people, you do your Saturday class or whatever. I would say still keep it. And you need to build in resistance training. Like the resistance training needs to be the foundation of your movement program. And you can still keep the things that you love. Like I still do step. Like I still do step every Saturday morning.
What you like
Uh,
play old DVDs or something?
yeah. Well, there's
Who
actually a
does
step.
step still?
Oh my gosh, my gym, they still
Oh,
have a
really?
step class and I
Oh my gosh.
love it. It is so much fun. It's like I said, it's my soul food. It just makes me so happy. I go with my girlfriend, like my friend, we've been friends since I was 16 years old. We go, we do the thing. It's amazing. So, I still keep that, but I also train, like resistance train, strength train, 4 to 5 times a week. Now you don't need to do that. You can see, and I've worked with women where going to the gym 2 times a week, 2 full body workouts a week, you can get phenomenal changes in body composition, in strength, and in muscle hypertrophy. And those are kind of the two real goals that we want to be thinking about in midlife: is strength. We want to either maintain or build the strength that we have, and muscle hypertrophy, which is like fancy for like bigger muscles, right? So we want bigger muscles and stronger muscles because we lose them. We actually lose strength first. We don't notice that, but we lose strength first. And then over time, as we lose those anabolic hormones, the estrogen, the testosterone, we lose muscle size as well. So they're slightly different. They can be achieved very similarly, but they're slightly different outcomes when we think about muscle. But yeah, women need to be strength training, whether or not you like it. Hire a personal trainer if you can. Get them to show you around the gym. If you know where all the stairmasters are and the ellipticals and the recumbent bikes, like you know where that is, great. What I find is usually a really big deterrent for a lot of women is not actually knowing where to go in the gym. It sort of feels like this part of the gym that's foreign, where like all the guys in tank tops that are making weird noises go. But but once you sort of like figure out your routine, like, oh, okay, so the Smith machine is there, and then like the hip thrust machine is over there. Okay, and then the abduction machines. Like once you kind of figure out the plan of your gym, I think that that's actually psychologically. I know we're talking about exercise, but psychologically, it makes the gym feel more like home versus this like foreign place where you feel like you have two left feet and you don't know where you're supposed to go now, and like everyone's staring at you. So I think that if you can just hire a trainer once or twice, walk you through the gym, maybe make a program for you so you have a flow where you can kind of navigate through the weights, the free weights, the kettlebells, the barbells, all the machines and stuff, you'll be so much better off. So I would say 2 times a week would be where I would start with most women.
So why is it important for women to focus on building muscle and increasing strength versus aerobic activities like running miles upon miles?
Yeah, great question. I actually didn't address that, so thank you. I would say it comes back to the same conversation that we were discussing with the protein, right? So protein stimulates muscle tissue, but it's not going to stimulate muscle tissue if you're not actually mechanically stimulating muscle tissue. As we age, we just typically become more sedentary, and again, with the loss of some of these like the loss of these reproductive hormones, and other things like being more sedentary, we lose muscle probably at a rate of like 1% per year. If we're not, maybe even a little bit more than that, like 1 to 1.5% per year. So over the course of like 10 years, you can lose like 10%, 10% of your muscle mass, which is huge in a decade. And I don't think that a lot of women like, when you're like, okay, things are a little different now when I'm 40, or maybe you're 50, and like, okay, 40 to 50, yeah, I could see myself slowing down, but it's not that big of a difference. Like once you are in menopause and you are like 65 and 70, I don't think that people really think, we tend to think more linearly. We don't really realize what a drop off in function we have in terms of strength and muscle size. So I would really encourage women to be trying to add to their strength. So that is going to be really heavy weights, and we can define what heavy is if you want, but heavy weights with good form, um, and approaching failure. Like this is actually how you are going to get those strength gains and like preserve. There's a type of muscle fibers called the type 2 muscle fiber, which is involved in forcefully contracting as hard as you can. Like we tend to lose that. You don't notice when you lose it, but we definitely want to be optimizing for that.
And those are the fast twitch muscle fibers you're talking about? Yeah, one way I think I describe it to my followers, and I put this in my book too, is we have slow twitch muscle fibers, which are used for endurance type of activities, and then there's the fast twitch muscle fibers, which are used for short bursts of strength. And one of the things you want to avoid as you get older, especially over the age of 50, is you want to avoid breaking your hip, because there's near 50% mortality in the first, I think, 5 years or something if you break your hip. And the reason why a lot of people break their hip is they basically don't have those fast twitch muscle fibers. So let's say they trip over something, and instead of you or I, we may trip over something and then we stabilize ourselves so we don't fall on the ground. And people who haven't been doing that because all they've been doing is walking or jogging or something, they trip and they don't have that necessarily, those muscles that are used to to those types of reflex quick actions to stabilize them, and then they get hurt. And so that's one of the ways that I kind of describe it for people, especially as they get older in their 60s and 70s, is like, okay, you want to avoid injury, basically. And one way to do that is to make sure that you have all those muscle fibers, are used to kind of coming in when you need them.
Yeah, so think about if you're like you've given a really sort of like some colorful imagery in terms of what can happen. So if you're falling, you trip on, I don't know, corner of a rug or your grandson's Lego, or it's, you live on the East Coast and it's, you fall on black ice or something, right? It's slippery outside. So think about what needs to happen in order for you not to fall. So you're falling forward. You need to have enough speed with your hip flexors. So these are the psoas, but there's a couple of them, but the iliopsoas is the main one. You need to have that flex very quickly to get your foot on the floor. As your center of mass is moving forward, you need to be able to get your foot on the floor. So you need to flex the knee, flex the hip, and get the foot on the floor. And then you need to brace the fall with that leg. So you need to be able to, in an elongated position, the glutes need to be able to stop the movement. So most, and so the glutes are, by weight, I'd probably say that the biggest muscle in the body, followed by the quads and then maybe the lats. You need to have strong glutes. So they also look really nice, but like just from a functional perspective, right? I mean, you can talk about the plastic, from the augmented side maybe, but or an aesthetic, the aesthetic perspective, but from a functional perspective, strong glutes, strong hip flexors are very, very important. So leg training, things like squats, where you're actually in a full range of motion squat, where you're coming all the way down, but is either at 90 or below, you're mimicking that position, right? Where the glute is stretched and then it has to forcefully contract to get you back up. That is training not only for nice shorts in the summertime, but also for an unfortunate event like tripping and falling, where your glutes can actually stabilize. And this is where a lunge would come in as well, like doing lots of lunges on one leg, being able to sort of stabilize and catch yourself. So, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that it's important as we age to be thinking about the integrity of the hips, like hip stability. And that includes the hip flexors, that includes the muscles on the side, the abductors, and then the extensors, like the glutes primarily. There's other ones, but the glutes are the big ones.
For a woman who's going into the gym now, they listen to this, they say, "Yeah, I think I'm going to go and I'm going to start doing some strength training." But as you mentioned, it can be kind of a little scary because here you are, you're surrounded by these guys who are, making all these grunting sounds and they're, dropping the weights on the ground and all that. Is it necessary, do you feel, for women to truly have to go with free weights, or can they just stick with the machines, the Nautilus type machines, or do they not get enough of a benefit if you're just going with the machines?
Oh, of course I do. Yeah, you can totally get a great stimulus with machines. I don't know where this came from. I just feel like the only way to do it is if you are doing a barbell squat. It's like, well, some people can't do that. It's like some people have bad shoulders where they can't actually put the barbell on their back. Some people have disc herniations where they can't have that axial load, right? So I don't know where this came from, and it really angers me. So I think, yes, you can completely get incredible stimulus. You can get an incredible workout from machines. I've been working out for decades. I still use machines. Um, I mix it up with lots of different things, but machines are a wonderful way. And you know what's really nice about machines? They give you stability, right? So before you maybe if you're new to the gym, you don't necessarily have like the motor pattern like dialed in for a squat, let's say. Like squats are actually very difficult to do technically well, but they have a lot of machines where maybe it's a leg press machine or it's a seated leg, and the nice thing about that is the line of drive is already calculated for you. You just have to get into the thing, hold on to the barbells and or the handles, and then select the weight that you're going to do. So the stability aspect to machines are fantastic because once you add in more stability, you can actually recruit more muscle fibers, right? This is why working out on Bosu balls is, if the goal is hypertrophy, it's silly because if the goal is balance, Bosus are great. But if the goal is muscle hypertrophy, we want to get into a machine where we're actually adding in more stability so you can actually recruit more of the muscle fiber to begin with. So all this to say is I love, love machines, love barbells, love dumbbells, everything and anything goes. Yeah.
All right, so I've got a number of kind of quick hit questions I'd love to ask you that we can kind of go through pretty quickly. And these are, I think, frequently asked questions that people always wonder about. And so, if we can kind of get a quick answer for each of these, I think since our
Oh
time is
God.
running short, I would like to get
Okay.
this for
Sure.
our listeners today.
Okay.
What do you think of long distance running?
Short answer, short answer. Okay.
Short
So
answer.
I'm going to say it's like a 5 out of 10. If I could that's like my short answer. The slightly more nuanced answer is if most people can't run properly, so you're probably going to get injured. If you are the outlier that can run with no injury, have at it. But I'm not a huge fan.
Okay. Can too much cardio cause you to gain weight?
100%. Yes.
And can you briefly explain why? Because this is something I think a lot of people don't know.
Yeah, especially when it's the like not to poo poo on insanity, but when it's like, the 5 to 6 times a week of this really, really high intensity. I think as we age, we do have to consider recovery more than we did when we were younger. You need more time to recover. That's just a fact. So if you're always driving up cortisol with these super high intense workouts, this is a lot of times women will say, I was doing, Orange Theory or whatever it is 5 times a week in insanity, 5 times a week. And then all of a sudden I have this tummy, like this muffin top that I can't kind of get rid of. So that is often driven by cortisol
Okay, so you're stressing your body basically too much.
without appropriate recovery. You can still do those classes, right? So I still do the step, right? But I only do it once, maybe twice a week. So I would say 1 to 2 times a week max for these super high intense workouts.
Tell us about zone two cardio. A lot of people are talking about zone two, especially as you get older. Can you explain what zone two is? And is that something that you recommend for people?
Yeah. Zone 2 is we divide intensity of cardio into 5, depends on who you talk to. Sometimes it's 6, but we'll just say 5 zones. So zone 1 is sort of like puttering around your house, putting the dishes in the dishwasher, folding the laundry. Zone 2 is like a walk, right? Maybe it's I often I'm looking at my heart. So you can just look at your heart rate minus your age. This is the Dr. Phil Maffetone sort of equation. You want to not go over that number. That's typically zone 2, usually zone 2, maybe a little bit in zone 3 there. But Zone 2 is really great for mitochondrial function. This is where we can kind of build up the reserve and the capacity of our mitochondria. Again, there are differences between men and women. Who knew? Women tend to have, we tend to be, in terms of our muscle fiber type, we'd mentioned type 1 and 2 before, we tend to have more concentration of type 1 fibers. So we are already very much protected. We can do zone 2 forever. And all the ladies that are 40 and 45 listen, like, oh yeah, I did the elliptical for like an hour and a half, like 3, 4, 5 times a week. So we have the capacity already, like just the inherent genetic makeup and physiological makeup to do more zone 2. But as we lose estrogen, as we age, we lose that sort of protective cardiovascular effect. So we do need to be doing zone 2 stuff. So walks, light jogs. You can sort of, watch yourself on a cardio machine if you want. Even yoga, depending on if it's kind of a more yin yoga, is more of a zone 2 kind of work. So yeah, I do think the short answer is yes, we need zone 2. And what I think a lot of women don't do is the zone 5 stuff. Right. So we either are doing these pseudo high intensity workouts that are not quite at our maximum capacity. And we're not doing the zone 5 stuff. So the zone 5 stuff is the like doing that once a week, maybe twice a week maximum. That is going to also build up our strength and our power in those type 2 muscle fibers that we were talking about, but it's also going to be very cardioprotective as well, because it builds up something we haven't talked about, but it's called VO2 max, which is just the maximum capacity that your lungs can kind of take in oxygen and make use of it.
Mhm. How important is it for women over 35 to get 10,000 steps a day?
Uh, it's not super important. I think the data is pretty clear on 7 to 8,000 steps a day in reduction in all-cause mortality. The 10,000 is a bit of I don't know where it came from. I think it came from
I think
some
it's a
pedometer or
nice
something.
number, maybe, it's like 10,000
Yeah.
hours, 10,000 steps,
Yeah.
10, yeah.
I mean, if you're getting 10,000, like good on you. That's awesome. I think the minimum amount where it's been studied in the literature is 7 to 8,000 steps a day. We see a big reduction at that point in all cause mortality, cardiovascular, cerebrovascular disease, Alzheimer's, all the things, metabolic diseases, type 2 diabetes would be included in that. So 7 to 8 is great. Anything more than that is just like, you're awesome. Give yourself 2 gold stars on your chart.
Okay, final question. Is tennis truly the healthiest sport?
Okay, so this is a really cool question. Racket sports in general seem to confer a longevity benefit for most people. So these are and the reason why, there's a couple of reasons why. One, it's cardio, right? So we're conditioning the heart. But there's actually a lot of lateral motion in tennis, which is something that we don't actually get with the ellipticals, the recumbent bikes, the treadmills. Any cardio machine that you see in the gym is typically back and forward. Like it's typically forward and backwards, whereas tennis is very coronal, like it's left and right. So there's some benefits certainly in the lateral. And then there's also a lot of twisting, right? So there's a lot of core work that's involved there, which is also very important. We were talking about falls. If you have a strong core, that's another thing that I didn't mention. In order to brace yourself, you also need to have a strong core so you don't lose your balance and tip over. So strong core. And then the other thing is there's strategy, right? So you have to think, where am I going to hit this ball next? So your brain is always going. And then the last thing I'll say is that there's a community aspect that I think most people undervalue. Like I have tennis friends now. Like I never had I had friends, but now I have friends who play tennis and we get together. And now tennis is the medium by which we all get to spend time together. And I think when we think about community and growing old well together, this is another area where I've sort of changed my mind on. I used to be like, I'm an island. I'll do it all myself. No one's ever going to do it as good as I. And I've come to this place where I'm like, I need people. Like I need to be around people, and I want to be a part of people's lives. I want friends. So tennis is a wonderful way. The community aspect there, I think, is also like an unsung hero there too.
Well, I think this was a fascinating discussion. I really loved talking with you today. You've gave out so much great information for my followers. So, Dr. Stephanie Estima, you can find her on her podcast. Her podcast is called Better with Dr. Stephanie Estima, where she has just some fantastic alternative medicine and holistic health guests where they dive into a lot of the stuff that you heard today. So, I'd strongly encourage you to take a listen to her podcast. I do listen to it here and there myself because I find it, I learn a lot from it as well. And she's also very active on Instagram. She shows you how to do the right exercises at the right time. She cooks for you. It's like everything that you need from, I guess, a healthy doctor friend who's a female who's going through perimenopause.
That's the best. I love
And you've
it.
also tell us a little bit about, you've got like a newsletter and stuff. If you can share that, we'll put the links in the caption.
Sure. Yeah. So you can head over to drstephaniestima.com. All the things that you just mentioned, there's links for all of that. And I put out a weekly newsletter. It's called the Mini Pause. That's my little play on menopause. And it's a weekly roundup of just like the best action items for women who are 40 plus. So I know women, we are busy, we're important, we're raising children, we're dealing with our aging parent. Like there's just a lot that's going on in midlife. And so if you want a little bit of detail, like what's the top line, that's like the first line. It's like we have TLDR, this is what you should do. And then if you're sort of someone who wants a little bit more detail, we go into the why and the what. And if you're someone who just like, give me the mechanism, the more you read down the newsletter, the more detail it gets. So you can sort of pick and choose your flavor based on the week and your interest in the topic. And we send that out every Saturday.
Cool. And how do they get that? Where do they go to?
You can go to drstephaniestima.com and there'll be a pop-up that just pops up there. You put your name and email and you'll get the next one on Saturday.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for joining me today. This was great.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure when I get to spend time with you.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for watching and for listening. My name is Dr. Anthony Youn, and this is the Doctor Youn Show. As always, I'm going to leave you with this. Eat real food, use clean skincare, and auto-rejuvenate before you operate.